Hello my MGTOW brothers, here with another video, and today I want to discuss why is MGTOW so dangerous to the status quo. Now we all know that this has been discussed and this has been theorized about the effect that MGTOW is going to have on not only women but our society in general. And today I'm going to share my theories about why MGTOW is, I think, is so much more upsetting to the feminism, females, and the civilization in general. And I was looking at some charts maybe about a week or two ago, and a surprising thought came into my head about what was so upsetting about MGTOW to feminists and women. And I don't think it's just about, you know, the language, or what they call misogynist language. I think there's a little bit more behind that. So with that, we're going to launch into my reasoning. Now, it's pretty evident that there's two camps of MGTOW, though those are the under 35, I would say, and the over 35. Okay, the under 35, those are the young guys. Those are the guys that still are in our, you know, they're more purple pillars, I would say, for the most part, because they're still trying to figure out not only themselves but their role in this society in general. You know, their role with, you know, their relationship with women, their relationship with work, and the relationship with their place in the society. And you have the over 35 members, the ones that probably had a relationship or two, maybe have been married. Like most of them have been married. A lot of us have had kids. You know, I'm in that category, that over 35 category, got kids, you know, been in a relationship for a long time, have felt the ill effects of not only the relationships but also the cost of this this system that extracts money from you. So I'm one of those guys. I call us the guys that are especially over 40 that have been through the ringer, call them the old burnouts, the ones that have basically been chewed up and spit out by the system, and we're trying to get back what's left of our life and our integrity and our psyche. But I was looking at a couple of charts, and it dawned on me, and this one in particular. Now, looking at testosterone levels, and if you look at the testosterone levels, it pretty much matches exactly those two camps. If you look at where testosterone starts to make a significant dip, that's right at that 35-year level. Look at that. That's where you start to get the drop in testosterone. That makes a whole lot of sense, because at 35 you don't have that testosterone pushing you and, you know, forcing you to make a decision of either suffering or dealing with the female gender. Like Terrence Popp says, at 35, it's a changeover. You know, you stop thinking with the little head and you start thinking with the big head. In other words, you stop using sexual emotion to dictate your life, and you start using logic, which comes from the big head, to guide your relationships and what's right for the rest of your life. And sometimes that's, you know, at 35, a lot of time that's too late. You know, you've been married or you've had a couple of kids and you've gone through a couple of bad relationships, and then you You wake up out of that stupor, and then you realize that, okay, you don't feel it anymore. And then you realize you start to think that, what you've done in the past 15 or 20 years wasn't really worth what you spent, or the time and money that you spent into a relationship, and you realize you didn't get very much out of it except sex. As you can see, the prime time for marriage years, the prime time for sexual relations, is when that testosterone is high. Right there. And later on, we're going to see some more charts, how this one particular thing, this hormone, this powerful hormone that turns basically neutered females into men, affects us, starting at age of puberty, and basically for the rest of our lives. It's this battle between desire, or testosterone fueled desire, and logic. Okay, here's another chart. This is based on the same chart that we just saw, and you can see it's pretty much the same thing. You can see that testosterone for men peaks at about age 21 or 22, which used to be the prime time for a man to be married, which is the time that men are most likely to be under the spell of women. This is when young men try to have the most sex and have the most problems. This is also the time when women have most choice, because you look at the huge gap between estrogen levels, which causes desire in women, and testosterone levels. You can clearly see the advantage at that age that women have over us, or have over men. It's almost not fair. It's like getting to a ring and one fighter has been boozed up or had drugs ingested into their system, and their reactions are hampered by that drug. By the same token, you can see that as our testosterone at 35 is dipping, a woman's estrogen levels start to rise. And that's when her desire starts to peak. This is also the time that you see a lot of divorces. This is the time when a woman's arousal wakes up and all of a sudden she's not happy. This is the normal time when a lot of first marriages, if they're going to break up, this is when they're going to break up. The man's desire starts to wane. Woman's desire starts to rise. And then there becomes a mismatch where now the man's logic is in control. And the woman's desire is reversed. This is also her last. This is also, you see, this also her last chance to have children normally. So this is the biggest push, especially for women that have delayed having families. You see this big push to have children at this particular peak. Now, come to think of it, if men were a little bit more mercenary and they didn't buy into the Madison Avenue or the propaganda that you had to have a 10 or you had to have a young nubile woman, and they just wanted to have sex, this is a match. This is probably where men in their 20s, they're 21, 22, 23, should actually look for sex, right here, because this is where the young men have the advantage. But I digress. So we're going to go on to the Next slide. This basically confirms what we're talking about. It almost mirrors exactly the same thing. You can see a man's sexual appetite, or his libido, peaks out at age 20, in the early 20s, from age 19 to about age 25. Like I said, that is the prime time for a woman to get married, and also that is the prime desirability, a desirable interval for women from age 21 to 23. 21 to 25 is when she is most desired by men, because that is when the young males are more sexually aggressive. Their libido is highest. If you look, and it parallels to the same thing, you can see that the reversal point is exactly at age 35. This is what I call the MGTOW range. When testosterone basically leaves or starts to withdraw from the body, and logic starts to take over, that is your MGTOW range. This is also the range where women are least satisfied, because now she doesn't have the advantage anymore, because the help that she was getting from testosterone no longer applies. Like I say, all the charts seem to reflect the exact same thing. If you look at the peak of when men are actually in the dating field, or actually in the dating pool, it is at the exact same age. They peak out at age 21, 22 years old, and then it's a steady decline. And it's almost the same point where you see the reversal of men and women in the dating pool. At age 35, it starts to drop off, and it continues to be less and less as time goes on. And this is from OkCupid. Now, here's the interesting part. Now, we've already gone through the last several slides. We've gone through where testosterone has dropped off, and the big switchover is about age 35, when the switchover between the little head and the big head takes place, and the man's libido starts to wane to a point where he can actually start to think clearly. Now, here's the concern that women have. If you look at that 35-year-old range going on out, what I call the MGTOW range, it is also coincides with the man's prime earning years. The man's prime earning years is between age 35 and 55. He will earn more money in that particular range than he will in his entire life. That are his prime earning years. Normally at that stage, he's finishing off raising his children. He's sending his kids to college. He's preparing for retirement, that kind of stuff. That is the prime acquisition phase for a man, because he's earning the most money. And that's also the prime acquisition phase for women. So now what if all of a sudden those men went MGTOW? Those men took themselves out of the pool. They didn't finance families anymore. If they were married, they got divorced. They didn't want to have children. they didn't want to be married anymore. How many women would be in poverty if men all of a sudden at 35 years old decided they didn't want to participate? And think about all those women that have gotten degrees and gotten careers and decided that, after age 30, they wanted to be married right when their libido was starting to rise. And all of a sudden they hit the MGTOW range where men didn't want to be bothered with them anymore. That would take a lot of money out of the system. That would take a lot of money out of women's hands. A lot of times we think that they're concerned about the young men over here, and rightly so, because MGTOW does affect these men here. But the immediate effect is when the men get to this particular range, because here, like I said, they will earn more money than the rest of their lives combined. Now, like I say, if you can see the swap in sexual desirability to the sexual marketplace. When testosterone is high, women are king, or women are in the lead. Women are the most desirable item. Sex is more important than money. Sex is more important than possessions. Everything that men do is to have sex in this range, because this is a testosterone range. When you get here, what's more important to a man is his own future, is his own being, is his own thoughts, is his own habits, it's his own practices. The man is more self-centered. This is when, as they call it, the midlife crisis happens. When all of a sudden everything that he's done to this point doesn't make sense anymore. If you notice that first 5 years in that MGTOW zone is what they call the midlife crisis, when he sacrificed having a convertible or having fun for his family, sacrificed travel for having a family. He sacrificed a lot of things to date, and a lot of things that he did for others is reversed. All of a sudden he's thinking more of himself and his own self-empowerment, or in his own passions. Now here's something interesting. Here is where feminism has been destructive to itself. If you look at it, before 1970, the majority of men got married in that particular range, that 19 to 25 range, with a peak at 21 years old. Now, after feminism, abortion, and birth control, and the state started to be more oppressive against men, they started delaying marriage. And now what you see, instead of a sharp rise and peak where you see the majority of men getting married between the ages of 20 and 25, back pre-1971, now you see a more gradual curve. Now you see the peak just starting at 25 and leveling out and carrying into the 30s, and then you see the gradual drop off, and in the early 30s to age 35, and you see a huge decline when you get to the MGTOW zone, where marriage just almost drops off the table. So feminism has changed the game by pushing marriage later into the later 20s, when men's desirability, when a man's desire for women actually starts to wane. See, the conservative women were actually right. Women probably should get married at 21, 22, 23, because that is when their value to men is the absolute highest. When they're 21, 22, 23, because the average man desires a woman most at that particular age. Feminism is sowing its own seeds of destruction. Here you can see it represented again in this chart. The median age for a man to get married in 1959 was 22 years old. After feminism, 50 years of feminism, the average age is almost 29 years old. So they pushed the average out 7 years, and well past the man's peak, because the peak is here. The peak for a man to get married is here. Or I should say here. And they pushed this all the way out to the point where now his testosterone is declining, and the value of women is also starting to decline. And this, you can look at the trend. This trend is still rising. In another 10 years, the average age will be 32. If you look at this trend, you look at it, like I said, the seeds of destruction for feminism is built into the system itself. As the system becomes more oppressive, as the system becomes more onerous, you can look at the decline in marriages. It's just a decline in first marriages. If you look at that, just look at this. The number of marriages for 1,000 people, look at that. It was 76. It's cut in half. The marriage rate has declined to 50% in just 40 years. That's feminism at work. Feminism is creating MGTOWs. Like I said before, MGTOW is a natural reaction to this feminist system that they're running. It also reflects in the same thing. If you look at my last videos, you look at the birth rate. This is society trying to keep its birth rate stable. This reflects the baby boomers. You can see the bump. This is the beginning of the country reflects the beginning of the country when the migration from the old world started. This reflects the baby boomers. And the last peak was 1970. We tried to level off. And then it just, feminism in the family courts just decided that it wanted to extract wealth from the men. And while it succeeded for a while, where women were still having children, it just fell off the cliff. If it wasn't for immigration and immigrants having children, the United States will be well below replacement. Women aren't having children, and men aren't producing children. Men know their children are a liability, and men are reacting to it.